Buying a used car off a Craigslist ad was a risky move in retrospect. I was just desperately in need of a cheap replacement after my old clunker died. I never imagined the terrifying discovery I'd make inside after bringing it home. A loaded gun hidden under the back seat. Money was tight when my car finally croaked. My family needed wheels ASAP, but our budget only allowed a used car. Out of desperation, I turned to Craigslist ads, hoping to find a bargain. One Craigslist listing caught my eye right away, a 1999 Honda Civic being offered for only $1,200. The photos in the ad showed the exterior had some minor dents and scratched up paint in places, but overall the car seemed to be in decent shape on the outside. According to the listing, the tires were recently replaced and had good tread, and the interior was clean and well maintained. The seller described the car as having no major mechanical issues and running great for its age. What jumped out was the reason given for the low price. The seller was apparently a single dad who explained he urgently needed cash fast after unexpectedly losing his full-time job. He said he was willing to let the reliable old Civic go for so cheap because his priority was getting money immediately to support his two young kids. Given my own pressing need, the price and circumstances seemed reasonable enough that I decided to reach out to the seller. I arranged a time later that day to go check out the car in person and take it for a test drive. If it lived up to the ad's claims, I planned to make a cash offer on the spot so I could finally have a working vehicle again. But my wife Beth was understandably very uneasy when I excitedly told her about the lead I was pursuing and my plans to go meet this random person from Craigslist who was selling an old Civic. She worried buying a used car directly from an individual like this was extremely risky compared to getting a basic used economy car loan through a licensed dealership that we knew and could trust. Beth practically pleaded with me to just keep looking at more reputable options, even if they cost a bit more. She was adamant that purchasing a car from a total stranger based only on some photos, without a mechanic inspection or even meeting in a public place, was asking for trouble. But with needing a replacement vehicle immediately in order to keep my job, I glossed over her very legitimate concerns. In my haste and desperation, I dismissed my wife's wise objections, assuming it would all be fine if the car checked out in person. So later that day, with $1,500 cash from our limited savings tucked in my pocket in case I wanted to negotiate, I headed across town to the address the seller had given me, ready to potentially make an offer on the spot. In retrospect, I clearly should have listened more thoughtfully to and heeded my wife's hesitation rather than barreling ahead just because I was in a bind. Because her intuition proved right, hastily purchasing an unvetted used car from an untraceable stranger in an attempt to save money ultimately put my family at unimaginable risk we're lucky to have avoided. When Beth saw all the Honda's dents and mystery stains, she shook her head disapprovingly. But she knew beggars can't be choosers. I decided to fully clean it before driving our kids anywhere, not knowing what mess lingered inside. The next morning while vacuuming under the seats, I felt something shoved far back. My heart raced as I slowly pulled out a loaded black handgun. Stunned, I sat there thinking about the violent criminal I'd likely just paid $900 directly. I carefully bagged the loaded gun in a plastic grocery bag to turn into the local police station right away, along with the very limited fake contact details I had originally been given by the shady seller when we met. But even with the weapon itself removed, the car still felt completely tainted and cursed now. That hidden gun's presence seemed like an invitation and open doorway to future violence and tragedy I refused to accept for my family's daily use. My wife and I came to a quick, unanimous decision. There was absolutely no way we could in good conscience keep this vehicle, given its potentially bloody and felonious history lurking below the surface. It felt inextricably connected to dangerous criminal activity in a way that made my skin crawl thinking of my wife and daughters riding around town in it, even with the gun gone. We feared keeping it would only attract further misfortune like a magnet. So we immediately let a local junkyard tow the old Civic away in exchange for a couple $100. It pained me to lose nearly the full $900 I had just paid for it, but I knew accepting that loss was a small price to pay for restoring peace of mind, because my family's safety and security is truly priceless to me. Later on, when the gun's serial number finally came back from the police forensics lab, the detective delivered even more unsettling news. The address, name, phone number, and every other scrap of information the mystery seller had given me initially were all completely fabricated dead ends that led nowhere. And the handgun itself matched one used in an unsolved armed robbery of a gas station on the other side of the city about a year prior. Learning this chilling detail made my blood run cold. It was like a reckoning I couldn't ignore. Suddenly, all the worst-case scenarios I'd imagined seemed grimly plausible, even inevitable had the gun stayed hidden, until we'd grown used to the car. What if my daughters had discovered it first? What if the armed robber had noticed it missing sooner, before I could turn it in, and track me down seeking violent revenge? For a while I was plagued by paranoia that this criminal could retaliate. My desperation for a car nearly put my family in harm's way. But we learned our lesson. Some risks aren't worth the rewards when lives are at stake. Now we listen to our intuition and avoid shady situations that make us uneasy. It's the only way we regain security after almost bringing such darkness into our lives unknowingly. We got lucky, but luck runs out. Going forward, we stay vigilant. I was in need of a new TV since mine had just broken. Rather than spending a ton at a big box store, I browsed Craigslist to see if I could find a good deal on a used one. I came across a listing from a guy named Mark, who was selling a 55 4K smart TV for only $200. That was way cheaper than retail, so I jumped at the opportunity. Mark and I arranged for me to come by his house that evening to check out the TV. When I got there, he lived in a rundown home in a sketchy part of town. He welcomed me in and showed me the TV, which looked practically brand new. When I asked why he was selling it so cheap, Mark claimed he had bought it for a spare room he no longer needed furnished. Nothing seemed off, so I agreed to buy it. I realized as soon as I handed over the cash that I had no way to get this huge TV home in my compact car. Mark eagerly offered to help, saying he could deliver it to my place in his truck. In the moment I brushed off the voice in my head warning me this seemed fishy. I gave him my address and helped load the TV into his vehicle. During the drive to my apartment, Mark made casual small talk, but something about him gave me the creeps. I stayed on high alert in case he tried anything weird. When we got to my place, he carried the TV up to my door for me. But as I went to unlock it, he suddenly shoved me from behind, forcing his way inside behind me. I was terrified as he closed the door behind us, confirming my worst fears that this was a setup. His friendly demeanor quickly turned icy and menacing as he demanded more money if I ever wanted to see the TV again. I refused, standing my ground, at which point Mark became enraged, his eyes filled with a terrifying madness. It was clear he was ready to seriously hurt me if I didn't cooperate. Thinking fast, I grabbed the heavy glass vase off the table near me and swung it as hard as I could at his head. It smashed across his face, causing him to stagger back. He was caught off guard just long enough for me to make a desperate break towards the door. But Mark frighteningly recovered quicker than I expected. As I grasped for the doorknob, he grabbed my ankles tightly from behind, causing me to trip and hit my head hard on the wood floor. Dazed, I still frantically kicked and flailed my legs, trying to loosen his viz-like grip on me. Managing to twist myself around, I clawed at his hands and face, screaming for help. We struggled violently, knocking over the side table and lamp as I tried fending him off. Mark was yelling now too, his eyes filled with wild rage. I knew I was fighting for my life. In that split-second scramble, my hand found a piece of the broken vase. I grabbed it and smashed the sharp edge down over Mark's head. He howled in pain, but still didn't release me. I felt the warm blood now running down my own face from the gash on my forehead. We wrestled savagely on the floor as I slashed and swung the broken vase in pure survival mode. Finally, I smashed it across his temple one last time with every bit of adrenaline-fueled strength I had. That blow caused Mark to loosen his grip on me, just enough that I could break free. But I knew I wasn't safe yet. Ignoring my own searing pain, I frantically crawled towards the kitchen to find another weapon. Mark was staggering to his feet now, even more inflamed. As he lurched towards me, I grabbed the first solid object I could find, a heavy cast iron skillet. Wheeling around, I swung it with primal intensity, connecting the pan's edge straight into Mark's face. The impact sent him crashing backwards, finally disoriented enough that I could gain the upper hand. Before he could recover, I jumped on top of him, pinning his body down under mine. Summoning every ounce of power left in me, I punched him repeatedly with a skillet until he went limp beneath me. His face was covered in blood and contorted in pain. He was still breathing, but seemed fully unconscious now. Gasping for air myself, I quickly dragged his limp body away from the door so I could slip out. I ran to my neighbor's apartment screaming for help and to call the police. Within minutes I heard sirens blaring as cops swarmed my building. 2 officers came to take my statement and escort the now handcuffed Mark outside. I was still shaking from the surge of adrenaline, but I was overwhelmingly grateful I had managed to overpower my attacker. The police commended my quick thinking and self-defense skills. After giving my official statement down at the station, the police said I was free to go. They assured me Mark would be locked up for assault and attempted robbery, although still rattled. I now felt safe and calm knowing he was off the streets. The TV ended up being confiscated as stolen evidence, but that was the least of my concerns. In hindsight, I should have listened to my instincts when everything about Mark seemed sketchy, but I let my eagerness for a good deal cloud my judgment. I'll never make that mistake again. No gadget is worth risking my safety. I'm just relieved I was able to physically defend myself when I needed to. After taking some time to mentally process it all, I regained my confidence to keep living life on my terms. I refused to become paranoid or scared of every stranger. But I did learn to set better boundaries and make wiser decisions. As much as we want to assume the best in people, there are predators out there looking for vulnerable targets. I got a bone-chilling Craigslist tale that will make your blood run cold. This all began with a simple desire to sell my trusty old vintage cruiser, a 2-wheeled companion that had stood by me through thick and thin. Little did I know that listing it for sale online would plunge me into one of the most harrowing experiences of my life. So there I was, scrolling through the endless labyrinth of Craigslist listings and potential buyers. The sun was casting a warm golden glow across the room, and I was eager to find a new home for my beloved bike. My ad was straightforward, featuring a handful of photos and a brief yet heartfelt description of the bike's history. Within a few hours of posting the ad, my inbox chimed with a message from a fellow named Jake. His initial message was courteous, brimming with enthusiasm about the bike. He fired off a barrage of questions about its condition, its history, and of course, the price. Our digital exchange seemed amicable, and we quickly agreed to meet later that day at a nearby park. I hopped onto my bike, the same one I was planning to part with, and pedaled over to the park. The weather was absolutely perfect, and I had daydreams of closing the deal and treating myself to a triumphant ice cream cone afterward. Yet, as I approached the rendezvous point, an unsettling feeling began to gnaw at my gut. There, on a park bench, sat Jake. However, the man who greeted me bore little resemblance to the friendly persona he projected in our messages. His eyes darted around restlessly, like a caged animal, and he kept sneaking furtive glances at my bike. A creeping unease crawled up my spine, but I attributed it to nerves, both his and mine. As I drew nearer, Jake stood up and extended a clammy hand for a handshake. His grip was oddly strong, and his palm was slick with perspiration, which made me feel uneasy. He requested a test ride, which was entirely reasonable, and I obliged, still hoping my uneasy feelings were mere paranoia. Jake swung a leg over the bike and pushed off, pedaling away. For a fleeting moment, things seemed to be going precisely as planned. However, as he circled back toward me, the situation took a heart-pounding turn. With abrupt acceleration, he veered off into a nearby alleyway, leaving me in shock. Panic surged through my veins as I comprehended the gravity of the situation. Without a second thought, I dashed after him, my heart hammering wildly in my chest. The idea of letting this thief escape with my beloved bike was unthinkable. As we turned the corner into the narrow alley, I spotted Jake struggling to maintain control of the bike. It was clear he hadn't expected me to pursue him so fervently. I closed the gap between us, my breath ragged and eyes locked on my stolen treasure. But just as I reached out, Jake executed a sharp turn into a labyrinth of tight, winding alleyways. It was now a game of cat and mouse, and the advantage was still in my hands, given my familiarity with the bike's handling. We raced through the winding maze, and I could hear Jake's labored breaths ahead. The thief was beginning to tire, and I knew I had to seize my opportunity. As we rounded yet another corner, a heap of cardboard boxes lay strewn across our path. Instinctively, I swerved to the side, narrowly avoiding the obstacles. Meanwhile, Jake plowed directly into the boxes, sending him sprawling to the ground. My bike skidded to a halt, and I leaped off, the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Jake scrambled to his feet, cursing and threatening, but I refused to let him slip away again. With all the strength I could muster, I tackled him to the ground, hitting him beneath me. He struggled violently, spewing a torrent of profanities, but I held firm, my bike mere feet away. Knowing that I couldn't afford to let him escape, I reached for my phone and dialed 911, explaining the situation in frantic detail. The police arrived promptly, apprehending Jake and leading him away in handcuffs. It turned out he had a rap sheet littered with theft charges and was wanted for several other offenses. As they escorted him away, a mixture of relief and anger surged through me. I had my bike back, but the entire ordeal left me rattled to the core. Selling anything on Craigslist had never felt so fraught with danger. It was a stark reminder that the anonymity of online transactions can sometimes shroud a darker reality. So there you have it, my Craigslist horror story. It may not be your conventional ghost tale, but it sent shivers down my spine. Since that day, I've exercised extreme caution when dealing with online sales, and I hope my story serves as a cautionary tale for all. Stay vigilant out there, folks, and always trust your instincts, even in the digital realm. Thanks for listening in. If you like what you hear, then please like and subscribe and support this new channel. Until next time.